Each Friday at this time, hosts Dennis O'Brien and Susan Johnson interview guests who are involved in their community. The show challenges conventional thoughts, probes for answers, remembers the past, imagines the future, and gets to the heart of the matter. Let's Talk About It is brought to you by Columbia Ford Kia, Route 6 in Columbia, Connecticut, and Gates GMC Nissan, Route 66, the Boston Post Road, North Windham, USA. Opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of WILI staff, management, or sponsors. Now, let's join our hosts with their guests, and let's talk about it.
Hey, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Let's Talk About It. This is Susan Johnson, and I'm here with my co-host, Dennis O'Brien.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, Dennis, and do we have a fabulous guest for everybody to hear today, don't we?
Yes, we certainly do.
We are so pleased and honored to have the Speaker of the House, Matt Ritter, and he's done amazing work at the Capitol, and he continues to do amazing work. So we are so happy to welcome State Representative and Speaker Matt Ritter to the show.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Dennis. Thanks for having me. It's nice to be back.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I know you're busy, Matt, and thank you so much for taking some time off from your busy schedule to be with us here and on Let's Talk About It in Willimantic, Connecticut.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I'm glad to be here with you.
Fantastic. Now, Susan mentioned that you were the Speaker of the House. Of course, that's the Speaker of the State House of Representatives in Connecticut, and it's a big job. And could you tell our listeners, Matt, what is it that the Speaker of the House does, especially in a short legislative session like you're in right now?
I mean, look, I think that the main power of the Speaker is probably twofold, right? One is you preside over the entire chamber, and so that gives you a role in just making sure debates are done according to our rules, and we try to keep everything on time and track of schedule. But I think the other main power is, you're the one who ultimately is calling the bills, and so no legislation is going to be called without the Speaker's sign-off, and that's a big role. Obviously, you work with your chairs and your colleagues and your majority leader and minority leader, but at the end of the day, if the Speaker really hates something, it's probably not going to pass.
Well, that's wonderful. That's a good description in general of what you do. And, you are presiding over a group of 151 people when you have all kinds of deadlines to meet. That's got to be difficult.
Yeah, it is. And I think you try to be as open as you can with your members, both in terms of your office and meetings, and also just being truthful about how much time we have, what can we get done, what's the budget look like. I think as long as you give people the rules of the road and they feel like they're being given a fair shake, I think they can take no. I think if you hide the ball, it's a lot harder for people to take the no.
That's so true, and I just want to say how much I appreciate your work, and I appreciate the fact that you are open to all the members in the House for discussion about the issues that we all are we care so much about, really. When we're representing our districts, every single district means a lot to the representatives that are representing them. So, yeah, you are very, you're amazing, really, being able to make sure that I can text you and you get back to me right away. It's a fabulous thing that you do, and I know that that's the same experience every single member has, no matter which side they're on.
I appreciate that. It means a lot, and again, know how the hard work you put in, and a lot of legislators are in the same boat. They're doing what you do. They're listening to their constituents 24/7. They're in the district, and there's probably nothing more aggravating than reaching out to your leader once in a while to try to get some information, not getting a response. So I take that as a big part of the job, is being responsive and getting back to people, for sure, just like you do, right?
Oh, yes. I work very hard at trying to make sure I get back to all my constituents here in Windham, and, working with other legislators that where we're working on different issues together because they have an impact on that particular, all our districts. So working on so many issues together. And one of the wonderful issues that we worked on and we were finally able to address during the special session in November was the housing bill, House Bill 8002. I know that there had been a lot of work being done on that with Representative Rojas, and he had been working with everybody all over the state to try and figure out the best way where we could coordinate a future for housing in Connecticut.
Yeah, I mean, and you mentioned, I mean, Major Leader Rojas deserves a ton of credit for all the work that he put in, not just for a year, for years, as you alluded to. And I think at the end of the day, what that bill is ultimately going to do is allow our state to develop in the right way, in a responsible way, working with our municipalities, but develop housing that's not just standard single-family, 3,500 square feet, 3 bedrooms, the kind of thing. I mean, there's a lot of different people who need different things at different times. You have people who move here after college who don't need a lot of room and just need a place to stay where they can work for electric boat. You have people who are downsizing because their kids have gone on and moved away, and they want to stay in their communities. So we're trying to figure out that middle housing, so to speak, and the right places to put it. I think there's more carrots than sticks in the bill, and ultimately we were able to get to a good compromise with the governor on it. I think it's going to make a difference in our state.
I think so, too. And, of course, being a representative in an area where we have more public housing on a per capita basis than anywhere else except Hartford, and also we have 3 homeless shelters here. We have all kinds of different types of housing. We have mobile home parks. We have multifamily dwellings. We have very large mansion-style houses. So we have a lot of different housing here. We've got the Range in Windham. And so it's really important for us to have, more housing opportunities for everybody. And we look here on our Main Street to work very hard to expand housing opportunities for our students, because we need student housing too, because we have the University of Connecticut that also many students come here to live, and we have Eastern Connecticut State University students and the community college students. So all those students need a place to be, and there's a lot of transitioning in and out of those multifamily dwellings.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this bill will be a good start in the right direction. And the state has also put up a considerable amount of funding to help out, whether it be new homeowners, anyone looking to build multifamily apartments. So Department of Housing is a great place to look if you're a developer looking to build some more of that housing that we need here in Connecticut.
Absolutely.
Well, Mr. Speaker, you and Representative Rojas and Representative Johnson have a real good understanding of the housing situation in Connecticut and why this bill was needed. I remember I started as a legal aid lawyer with Connecticut Legal Services predecessor back in 1972. And for a long time, my specialty was housing. I worked with housing programs like the federal programs, 236 housing, 221D3, and then Section 8 came along. And, back then, there really wasn't anywhere near as much of a housing shortage in general as there is today. So the Representative Rojas did really well to recognize that and to go as Susan said, go all over the state and talk to all the representatives and anybody who knew anything at all about the issue, and to come up with this bill. I know it didn't get the governor's signature originally, but adjustments were made, and I think it's a good show that the legislators of the state of Connecticut can work together and get things done that benefit everybody. And this was not an easy problem to address, and we'll have to see how it works out in the long run.
Yeah, that's well said. I agree. They're never easy to do big issues, and we'll see where we get 3-5 years down the road. But I think we'll make good progress, and I even think people who were originally opposed to it, I think maybe they'll come along. We'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really love the idea of taking a look at some of the empty buildings and being able to create housing in those. When we think about the fact that we have, it's estimated somewhere around 110,000 being short, 110,000 units short, and that's of all types of housing. That is quite a huge amount of housing to build, and it does take time to build housing. So I was really happy to see part of the bill was to try and make sure that if we have empty buildings that may have been, commercial at first, that they can also be transitioned to housing. And I thought that was really smart.
Yeah, no, I agree. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and also, moving on to, Dennis.
Yeah, I just don't want to, our time is relatively short, and I don't want to forget to have you talk a little bit about terrific response the Connecticut government, the governor, the House and the General Assembly made to the cuts that were made on the federal level in really important programs like SNAP. I guess it was
the Affordable Care Act.
Affordable Care Act, and also
and Medicaid.
Medicaid.
Yeah. Yeah, back when we were doing the budget almost a year ago now, right? We adopted our budget in May of 2025. We included a federal response fund, a federal emergency fund, because we had been, at the time Congress had enacted, but you could read the newspaper articles and get a sense that potentially there would be these reductions to, ACA subsidies, as you mentioned, Dennis, Medicaid, as Susan talked about. We had Planned Parenthood receive reductions, and that fund ended up going into use pretty quickly. The governor stepped up and appropriated about $200 million to backfill federal cuts. Look, hopefully common sense will prevail in Washington, and they'll go back to funding the things that they funded forever for the state of Connecticut and the state of Alabama around Medicaid and SNAP and things like that. But this was our initial reaction to what we were seeing in Washington. We were proved correct for creating that fund and establishing it. And look, I hope we don't need that fund in the future or additional funds. We hope that, like I said, Congress will restore some of these cuts, but we have to be ready and prepared to help our residents when you're talking about health care and food, pretty basic things. But the state will have to be prepared to take that on, just like 49 other states in the country will have to as well.
That's correct, and I was just so thankful. I've been to some community events lately, and people have been very thankful to be able to sign up again for the Affordable Care Act with the subsidy, because without the subsidy, the cost would have been way out of reach for the people here in my district and throughout the state, of course. But that is something that people have come to me and actually mentioned that they were so glad to have the subsidy to the Affordable Care Act, which includes some of that is the Medicaid funding that had been taken away as the subsidy for the people at the 130% of poverty and going up to 400% of poverty. So we have a great continuation of healthcare access for people, which means that the providers are going to be paid. And when the providers are paid, they can continue to provide to all people. People who don't need the subsidies will continue to get coverage, but if we don't provide the subsidies to the people that need the coverage, then people who don't need that kind of subsidy will also lose out because access to health care will decrease immeasurably.
Yeah, that's well said. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Well, Matt, I've lived in Connecticut all my life from, growing up in New Britain and then moving on to Eastern Connecticut when I went to UConn. And, I've always been very, very proud to be, to be a Connecticut resident, to be a part of Connecticut, because Connecticut takes care of its own much, much better, as far as I can tell, than most other states in this country. I mean, Connecticut, are your response as a group to these crises? I'd say they're crises. For especially for middle and lower income people in our state has been exceptional, and I continue to be proud to be a resident of Connecticut and have no plans to leave.
Nor do I have any plans to leave. It's a great place to live. And,
that's right. We're not going
anywhere. We got
anywhere.
our Huskies. Got some big games coming up, right? It's all exciting stuff. So.
It is great. We had in Wyndham here, Wyndham Tech, they won the championship.
There you go.
Yeah.
We had a championship in Hartford as well, so there you go.
Fabulous. So we're going to have a parade here April 6th to celebrate the championship here for Wyndham Tech. And I hope to get them to the Capitol as well to be able to have everybody say hi to them and congratulate them. So I have to work on that plan.
I look forward to seeing them some morning. Yeah, let me
Wonderful.
know. I'm sure I'll be presiding when they come in.
Wonderful. I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.
We're really proud of those kids. Wyndham Tech is the first technical school in Connecticut to win a state basketball championship since 1967.
Wow,
and that's a big
cool.
deal.
There you go.
Yeah,
we big deal.
Very proud, and I know a lot of these kids. I've coached Little League for decades, and I'm not doing it anymore. The arthritis in my knees has ended that. I cannot demonstrate sliding anymore. If I tried that, I'd have to have an ambulance ready to take me away. But did a lot of coaching, met a lot of kids, and there's an awful lot of kids from Windham, the town of Windham, city of Willimantic, that do attend Windham Tech, and it's a great mechanism for upward mobility for kids who want to do the trades. I'm not that inclined in that respect. I can't fix things. I don't work well with my hands. I'm more of I consider myself a wordsmith. So I'm happy being a lawyer and an amateur politician.
Actually, go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead, Susan.
No, I was just going to say, not just an amateur politician, but a judge, a former probate judge. So, yeah.
Yep.
Well, I was very proud to work with Don Williams and the rest of the people in the legislature to bring a special children's court to Willimantic to cover a county and a half, and I guess that was probably the best job I ever had. 12 years in the probate court, working mostly with children, which is something I really enjoy doing. And I think the probate court system in Connecticut is better now than ever. I think the consolidation that was done a few years back was a really smart move, and I was really glad to support it when I was judge.
Well, I also want to speak about the idea of the special fund that we created to make sure that shortly, in a few years, we will have fully funded daycare opportunities for people making less than $100,000 a year.
Yeah, so we have our child care trust fund. We got to continue to put more money into it to get the endowment large enough so that it would have interest that would allow that subsidy to occur. But if we're disciplined as a legislature, if we stay the course, and we're going to have to say no to other things to fund this, I acknowledge that, we could 4 or 5 years down the road look at families who come to Connecticut and say, we're going to give you pre-K for free. And I think it would make a big difference for so many families, and it will provide stability to the profession. It will provide stability for the people who operate the centers, stability for the teachers, the salaries. There's a lot of benefits to it, not just for the families, but for the workers as well.
Yeah, spreading the access to health care all throughout the state is so important. I mean, I'm in a child care desert here, and we want to make sure that we provide that. Early childhood is so important to the students, and so many students get them when they're little, and so many don't. And the ones that don't have to do a lot of catching up once they get to kindergarten and first grade.
Yeah, it's a big deal, and other states are beginning to look in this direction. I know New Mexico did, and others. You know, it's funny. We provide free public education from kindergarten to senior year in high school, and that's sort of everybody understands that. That's a given. But to your point, Representative Johnson, the formative years, we sometimes aren't willing to go the extra mile, but they may be the critical years to get people to senior year in high school or to college after that, or just to be ready for the workforce when they leave high school. So, you know, those gaps in years, I think we're learning as a state and as a country how critical they are, and that's why I'm proud we're going to be a leader in this country. But we got to be disciplined. We're not going to be able to fund new programs perhaps quite yet until we get this one funded, and I know that's hard, but we got to stay the road on this, stay the course.
I do appreciate that very much, Mr. Speaker, because I know that we have been incredibly disciplined since you've been the Speaker, and actually since you got to the Capitol, I think one term after me. It's been a real tough way to proceed, because when I got there, we didn't have a rainy day fund. We didn't have anybody spending any money on the debt. And so this has been quite a boon for the banks, getting all that interest, but it's not been very good for the people. So following the tight rules of making sure that we pay our debt, making sure that we go and follow the guardrails that may need some modification, just so that we can make sure that we don't leave people out in the process of paying the debt, is something that I'm very, very pleased about. We've made some good space in appropriations of capacity to increase funding in different areas, but we do have a long way to go, and we're still struggling with all the years that nobody paid anything. But when Governor Malloy came in, and then Governor Lamont, and all the people that have been working to make sure this is paid, we're really moving along quite nicely.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yep, thank you.
Matt, I was wondering if you could give us your bird's eye view, and nobody would have a better view of it, of where the legislative process is at right now and what we might expect to happen, or the rest of the way on through. What is it? It ends in June or May?
May.
It ends in May this year.
May.
Yeah, it's going to be a short one. Yeah.
It is a short one, yeah. So what?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think from a budget perspective, look, we will be hopefully sending, rebate checks, stimulus checks, whatever you want to call it, back to our middle and lower class families to help offset the rising costs we've seen through inflation, tariffs, federal reductions, to try to, make sure that, we give some of our surplus back to the taxpayers of the state of Connecticut. I think that will include, in addition to that, an increase in ECS. We've called it in the House property tax stabilization grants. The Senate's called it ECS. They're one half dozen the other. They're the same thing. We want our municipalities and our boards of ed to not have to raise property taxes by 3 mils, because that's just another burden and a regressive burden on families. So I think when we get out of here in May and on time, I believe, that'll be one of the highlights of the session. We're working on a lot of bills and a lot of committees, obviously. People have probably read about issues in public health around vaccines, or the Judiciary Committee dealing with issues around, ICE and enforcement issues, or, common sense gun control measures. So, we got a lot of bills that could take a lot of time to talk about, and so we're not going to get to every bill this year. The even years, we don't have as much time, but we'll definitely have some high-profile legislation passed in the coming weeks.
We really appreciate that. We're going to take a quick break right now. This is Susan Johnson with my co-host Dennis O'Brien, and we have our Speaker, Representative Matt Ritter, and we will be right back after these messages.
Hey, Dennis O'Brien back on Let's Talk About It with Susan Johnson and our very special guest, Matt Ritter. He is the Speaker of the State House of Representatives, and his dad used to be the Speaker. I know him very well, Tom Ritter. He was the Speaker of the House when, I was running around the Capitol back then and doing a little lobbying myself, or a little legislative advocacy, working with Rafi Podolsky. Rafi and I are old colleagues from legal aid, and I think I started around 2 or 3 years before he did, and he's still there at the Capitol doing his thing. Right, Matt?
He is, and Rafi's a neighbor of mine. He lives in my district in the west end of Hartford. He coached my sister in soccer many years ago, so I've known Rafi a long time, and he's still up here and still fighting a good fight on behalf of a lot of his clients.
Yes, he is. And but I do want to go back to talk about our education cost-sharing grant that you led a press conference on last week, I think it was. And I was really, really pleased to see so many people from the House be with us to talk about the fact that the education cost-sharing grant hadn't been increased or adjusted for inflation since, I think it was 2013. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, we've phased into increases, but I think you're right. I mean, those increases have not had the inflationary adjustment. So I think the goal is to do another phase-in of a large increase in ECS over a 4 to 5 year period, starting with this next fiscal year. And so for our towns, it's a big deal. I've heard from a lot of mayors and first selectmen and first selectwomen who are very supportive of it, obviously. Have had good conversations with the governor, very good conversations with the Senate as well. I think we're all on the same page. So, we'll see where we get in April. One thing that does worry me a little bit is our revenue numbers are declining a bit, and that's due in large part to some of the things you're seeing at the federal level, and obviously the things overseas in the Middle East, right? Mm-hmm. Our pension fund has taken a hit, just as the stock market takes a hit. When the stock market takes a hit, our capital gains taxes take a hit, our income taxes take a hit. So we got to watch that between now and mid-April, but assuming we come back with good revenue estimates, I think we'll have good news for our municipalities and our boards of ed.
Well, just the idea of talking about it and the way it's being presented is fabulous, because being able to connect the idea of the grants from the state to the education cost-sharing grant to fund our educational requirements under the Constitution is something that, I don't think I've heard that presented in that way, but making sure that people understand that when the state provides money for education cost-sharing grants to the towns that in those circumstances their property tax can be stabilized. And that's a big deal, especially now because of a lot of the changes. One is due to the fact that we have a reduction we need 110,000 housing units, right? And so when you have a need for anything, when there's a shortage, the price goes up of that particular thing. And in this case, it's housing. The value of the houses have gone up, but businesses have stayed stable. And so when that happens, the taxes go up on the housing, and it wouldn't have gone up quite to the same degree if, in fact, the businesses and housing values had increased about the same.
Correct. Yeah. No, revaluations are a real issue to that point. Look at the cities as office vacancies increase because people work from home now, and you have a lot of corporations downsizing their office space. A lot of that valuation shift goes right to residents. It's kind of a zero-sum game when you do revaluation. So these are all things that we think about, and that's why I think it's important to keep our municipalities and our boards of ed receiving that inflationary increases and being true to, you're right, our constitutional requirement to fund public education in our state.
Yes, absolutely. And that has been so important. And along with that, I was really pleased to see that last year we had, and we're still working, but more in combination with our educational committee, but we have the Select Committee on Special Education, which really put a focus on our special needs students and the formulas there for the special needs students. And we included that in our education cost-sharing grant requirements as well. So I was very pleased that you were instrumental in helping us create that Select Committee.
Yeah, special education is obviously an ongoing conversation up here because the costs continue to rise, and I hear from superintendents all the time about it. And it's all tied up in the ECS formula. It's all sort of wrapped up in that conversation. But it is, at the end of the day, I think the state has some obligations. You know, we talked about SNAP earlier or Medicaid. I would put special ed in that bucket as well. The more that we can make it more of a state issue as opposed to falling locally on taxpayers where, quite frankly, in a small town, you could get one or two kids who have extreme needs, and it could really be a budget breaker. I mean, there are sometimes kids who it's $1 million a year for them to get any kind of education due to physical, often not only intellectual, but physical disabilities. It seems a little amoral for the state to make that fall solely on a local town or a small town in eastern Connecticut. And so I think as the years go on, hopefully that conversation will continue. I think we started it in a great way last year, and there's more to come hopefully in the future.
Very, very much appreciated. And a lot of people who are in the local communities involved with the boards of finance or just involved with creating the budget locally are always surprised by the special education system and how at the end of the year sometimes there's money that had to be provided that they couldn't come up with because a child moved into the district with big special needs and cost a lot more than it had been anticipated. And because the formula is so convoluted, it's been very, very difficult for municipalities to be able to keep up with that, so, to your point, Mr. Speaker.
Yep. So we're working on it, and we still have reps who have taken a real keen interest in it, and we'll keep doing our best to help.
Absolutely. I'm, of course, as you know, I'm very interested in the special needs aspect, and very, very pleased that we're making progress in that area. And also, when you look at the special needs population, many may have mild learning differences, but also be traumatized from being in poverty or homeless, and be in those situations that exacerbates their ability to function in the school system, which is another reason we need to make sure we provide for the special needs students, because many of them are located in the communities where we have a low-income population.
Yeah, I agree. The challenges can be, there's a myriad of challenges that can occur. Poverty and some of the experiences that you talked about are things that, some kids have the burden of dealing with and families do that others don't. And that's why the more I think about it and talk about it over the years, I just think the state has a larger obligation perhaps than a local municipality.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that one of the things that happened when we were very pleased to be have the training schools, have the students that were in the training schools moved back into the community, but no adjustments were made at that point in time in terms of how to address the students with special needs. And it was just kind of done, and so that transition actually placed a burden on the towns that hadn't really been placed, that was really a state responsibility back in the day before we did the emptying out Mansfield Training School. Southbury's still in the process, I suppose. But those places that had the students now have them. The families have them back in the community or in group homes, and these are things that we're now just beginning to focus on that transition.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
I've represented a lot of towns, but I've never represented a Board of Education, Matt. But nevertheless, there's a lot of interplay, of course, between boards of education and what I call town hall, and there's competition for a limited number of dollars. So, it's really
true.
Helpful to have the state with your attitude and your the way you look at it, increasing the ability of local boards of education to address the kinds of modern problems they have to face in urban centers like Windham, like Hartford, and also in the smaller towns out here, like I represent some of the smaller towns, and they're having difficulty because of the tax burden is being transferred, as Susan pointed out, to a great deal from commercial to residential. And, this competition that exists between town hall budgets and Board of Education budgets can sometimes, create a lot of difficulty in town. And especially in the smaller towns, and it's problematic. And as you know, there was a court decision back in Naugatuck about 40 years ago that allowed charters to bifurcate budgets so that they vote separately on the education budget and on the town budget. Some budgets are still voted as a unit, which I prefer. But there is an opportunity for towns to do that, and some of them go through that process and think about it, and some of them do and some of them don't. But it is still there's a big burden on municipalities today, much greater, I think, than when it was when I first started in legal services back in 1972. The issues are much more complicated, and I think you and the legislature have a really good handle on the issues, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thanks, Dennis.
Yeah, no, I think that this, during your term and Governor Lamont's terms, he has actually been very, very good at being able to make adjustments in how we address the communities all over the state, making sure. One of the things I always say to people is that no matter which community you're in, the state, since I've been there, since I've had Governor Malloy there, since I've had Governor Lamont, since you've been the speaker, we take into consideration every single district. It doesn't matter who's representing it. We make sure that people are treated well all over the state and are given consideration for their needs. And of course, one way to do that is, again, special education, but it's also housing. And so, and creating that, we have the work that's being done in some of the schools throughout the state to create the manufacturing pipeline, which is something that is an excellent thing that has been done here. Of course, it's more about Electric Boat, but in other areas, it's about Pratt & Whitney or Sikorsky Aircraft. So that manufacturing pipeline is a really big deal.
Yeah, I think that's an important point that we try to treat every town. It doesn't matter who we represent. And I give you an example to your listeners. Our education cost sharing formula, when we talk about increasing it, we increase it to everybody. We don't pick between blue and red towns. And I sometimes in Washington, I fear that they do that. And I mean, you could probably blame both parties a little bit. They kind of pick blue and red state winners. We don't do that in Connecticut. We have never gone to a red town and cut them because they didn't vote for a budget or things like that. We play it straight with the formula to the best of our ability. And so in the last couple of years, we've never gone and just cut one or two towns for any reason. We've always tried to stick to the formula. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so important, and I think it's part of the reason we're able to communicate with each other at the Capitol, right? We all have our disagreements, but we all are able to sit down and talk it out. figure out a way to compromise. And the other thing I think it's very important for people to realize, and I do say this a lot, is almost between 90 and 85% of everything that we pass in legislation is done in a bipartisan way.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
I keep telling people about that locally as well. I sat on the town council after I retired from the probate court, aged out. I sat on the town council for 6 years here, and the same is true. I mean, there's really no Republican or Democratic way to pave a road and get things done locally. And we work together on most things. Although there are some out there that feel that there are people that are biased in favor of certain positions and whatnot. But I think in all the years I've worked with legislators on the state, even the federal and local level, I find people to be very objective, and much more objective than you hear about in modern times. I think a lot of people think it's not that way, but it is. People go into government because they want to do something to help people, and that's generally true.
I think that's right. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I just wanted to mention is going back a little bit to the changes in the Affordable Care Act, the need to update our Medicaid reimbursement formulas for the providers, because we haven't updated them in so long, is something that our providers really need very badly. But we're looking at that, and we're working on it, and we have had some studies about that, and I think we'll be able to do some modest increases this time, I hope, depending on how the budget looks. But making sure that we have here in Windham, we have our federally qualified health center, Generations. We have Windham Hospital, and we have behavioral health center at Windham Hospital now. And a number of other, places for people to go and get rehab if they have an addiction issue. So these are places that are really, really integral part of our healthcare system, and making sure we have the access to healthcare is very, very important for everybody.
Yep. I mean, we did a pretty big Medicaid increase in year 2 of our budget last year. Mm-hmm. It's about $40 million in state funds, or overall funds, I believe, which will be a big help to our, different providers on Medicaid. But again, it's still a work in progress. It'll be about $400 million overall for the state to get to about 75%, which I think for everybody, which I think is a great goal. And it's the kind of thing we'll have to work on in the coming years. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think focusing on that aspect is really, really important, especially in these times where we're projected to lose approximately, I saw just recently, about $1 billion a year because of the federal government's taking away money from the state of Connecticut. Right.
Well, that becomes the problem, is the cuts federally. I mean, the numbers I just gave you assume no federal cuts.
Okay.
If you add $1 billion in federal cuts, then you need $1.4 billion to get back to where you started. So this is a big challenge for the next legislature. Maybe they'll make changes in Washington and these cuts will never come to pass. But if they do come to pass, you can see how difficult a position folks are going to be in between the Medicaid and SNAP reductions.
Absolutely. And the SNAP reductions, and also one of the things we discovered here, because we have 3 soup kitchens, 3 food pantries, and 2 functioning, maybe 3 functioning soup kitchens, but we have one that actually gives out more than 1 million meals a year for the region. And when DOGE went in and got rid of the agricultural surpluses back in January, our soup kitchen started to suffer huge losses of about 400 pounds a day of food. So it's not just SNAP benefits, it's also the reduction from DOGE that I don't know where the agricultural surpluses went, but they didn't come to the soup kitchens, at least not here.
Yeah.
It's
there's growing need, and I hope our federal government can rise to the occasion to meet it.
Yeah, I mean, we have our farmers who are doing amazing work, a lot of work, and then we have Click here, the regional community licensed kitchen that actually works with farmers in Windham, in Connecticut rather, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts. So, growing, no pun intended, more agriculture opportunities here in this region will help us be more independent.
Yeah, no, there's going to be a lot to work on, again, with some of these federal cuts and programs that have been reduced. But that's why there's elections, and, we'll see what November brings. And if you have a balanced government in Washington, that may not be the worst thing, and may get people to get a chance to backfill some of the programs they reduced.
Excellent. And so and another thing I have to say I'm very thrilled about, and that is the Senate Bill 4 last year that included geothermal heating systems networks. And we're working on that now with the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. They're actually working with this group that we've created with Peter Millman, who has been working on environmental issues for years. We're coordinating all that. So I cannot thank you enough, Mr. Speaker, and the Senator Looney and the governor for adding the geothermal network opportunity for places. Now, I know that in Wallingford, Representative Mashinsky has been able to do geothermal networking for housing authorities. If we can start working on housing authority geothermal access, that will reduce the cost to the people living that are low income, that may be faced with budget reductions, but it will also they'll be able to have lower energy costs, which will reduce their overall cost, which will keep the businesses going in those local communities.
Yeah, I mean, we have to, the more we can diversify our ability to provide our residents, heat, electricity, the more diverse we are, the better, because, there's different price points and shock waves that can occur outside of our control, as we're seeing right now with oil. And so heat pumps are another alternative to it.
Absolutely. The geothermal water heat pumps are absolutely the best and most efficient. And so for us to be able to do geothermal and use the heat pumps without the geothermal heat pumps they last a much longer time, and they are able to really provide more steady heat access and cooling access, because they do both. They cool and they heat. And this is one of the things, to my surprise, our town manager has a background in geothermal, and he's able to also let us, I had no idea when he first started that we could utilize our sewage pipes to put a geothermal pipe under the sewage pipe to take that energy from the sewage pipe and utilize it. And so this would be good in environmental justice communities. It'll be good in all kinds of places that have a network capacity to provide that energy. So it'll be a great way for Connecticut to diversify, and I'm very, very excited about working with everybody on it. And so I'm all over the place on that, and we're meeting with Deep, like I said, on the 30th of this month with the groups that we're creating, and people are very excited about doing the geothermal. So I can't thank you enough for working with us on that, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Yeah.
With all that having been said, Matt, I know you and your dad are big fans of UConn basketball. I was wondering if you had any notions about how the tournament's going to turn out for UConn men. I think the women are in good shape in terms of their situation. In fact, we have Debbie, formerly Debbie Bayer, Debbie Fisk is she does the color on the radio for the UConn women's basketball broadcast, and she's also the director of our local community center here in Windham. And I talk to her all the time about this, whether this team is women's team is the best team ever. And they've had some great teams and some awfully great players, but this is an awfully good women's team, and I don't think they're going to have too much difficulty repeating.
Yeah, I feel good about the win. I mean, look, you still have potentially a match with Vanderbilt and Shea Ralph, former UConn players over there coaching, and maybe UCLA and South Carolina and then UCLA or Texas. So, look, I think they're not going to win by 60 every night like they did last night against Syracuse, but I feel good about them. On the men's side, look, tough bracket draw to go from UCLA to Michigan State, potentially looking at Duke or St. John's. I mean, I think you could argue that St. John's might be the hottest team in the country, and Duke, other than Duke. So that's going to be quite a game. But, Danny does such a good job, Coach Hurley does, and if we can get healthy, right, if we can get our Demery back at the point, if maybe Jalen Stewart can give us a few minutes, a little more offense off the bench, a little bit of size and depth, hey, they could make a run. They could do it. They could get to the Final Four, and then you kind of see where you match up after that. But really tough bracket in the East, and hey, I go to bed very early, as I think Representative Johnson knows. But for the last week, I've been up watching every second of it, and I can't wait to watch with my family, the next couple of games here.
Yeah, I think UConn has a good chance. I think there are a number of teams that have a chance. There's no dominant team in the men's tournament, so they could win it. They've won 2 out of the last 3, and this could be another one. I think they're good enough to go all the way. The St. John's game in the finals was not one to make one optimistic, but St. John's played incredible defense in that game. Incredible.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, and sometimes you're going to have games where you bring your A game, and I think if we play them again, we'll play them a lot better. I agree.
Oh, they know. We know they can do that because they did it just a few weeks previous.
That's right.
So anything can happen, and it's they're still in there. They're in the Sweet 16, and they've done it before. And as you said, Dan Hurley's a great coach, and they do have the players, and it's very exciting. And I'm all excited about it, and I hope they go all the way again. Of course, I'm a UConn grad and a UConn law grad, and big fan of the UConn basketball, just as you are.
Yeah. Yep, we're very blessed to have such a great program in our state.
Fantastic. Okay, we've got 1 minute left. You got any final words, Matt, for our listeners here in the Windham-Willimantic area?
No, it's very nice to be with you, Dennis and Susan, and again, appreciate you having me on to talk about a lot of issues. We covered a lot of ground, and I think I'll just end with Go Huskies, and I look forward to doing it again sometime later in the year.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. We
Thank
really
you both
appreciate
very
having
much.
having
Okay,
you on
we'll
the
let
show.
you go back to your busy workload. You do such a great job, and thank you so much for being
Thanks
on
so
the
much.
show, Matt. You take care and
Talk
have
to
a
you
good
soon.
one.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.